The state of Kuwait celebrates today the 58th anniversary of its accession to the United Nations by continuing its efforts and endeavors towards achieving peace, security, development, and human rights. On May 14, 1963, the United Nations General Assembly issued Resolution 1872, formally accepting Kuwait as a new member of the international organization, making it the 111th member to join the agency. Subsequently, Kuwait became one of the top exemplary countries cooperating to achieve peace, security, and development, along with a noble understanding of spreading the values of justice, further showing great respect and regard for the United Nations Charter. The number 111 carries to Kuwait historical connotations. It is the number that summarizes the country's unique priorities within its foreign policy. Kuwait's objective in political diplomacy can be defined as moderate and non-aligned statesmanship, with its primary goals set in the bounds of development diplomacy, ushering in the spread of peace through a humanitarian dialogue. This has been Kuwait's message to the world since 1963 until today, and it is the message that will forever maintain the values and convictions that the people of Kuwait grew up on and have always believed in. The country has always made clear its call for mediation, the rejection of extremism, and the spread of peace and dismantlement of war, extending the liberties of humanity onto all nations.
This is the 58th anniversary of our membership to the United Nations. We joined the UN on May 14th, 63. And that was a big event for us as a small country, independent. We have our sovereignty after signing the historical agreement with the United Kingdom. And we became a member of the United Nations, number 111. We are proud of the relationship we have with the United Nations, and it's improving and progressing year after year.
Kuwait has a close and contemporary relationship with the United Nations, working together side by side to spread international peace and security, preserve human rights, and evaluate justice and development around the world in cooperation and coordination with member states. The United Nations signed a technical cooperation agreement with Kuwait even before its accession to the General Assembly. Ever since the 1950s, Kuwait has been an active member in the esteemed committees and agencies of the United Nations, including the World Health Organization, the International Labour and Civil Aviation Organizations, the Universal Postal Union, among several other institutions. Kuwait has been an active member of the United Nations since the year 1963. In 2009, it finally inaugurated a fully fledged UN house in Mishraf area. Furthermore, Kuwait increased its voluntary contributions to a number of UN humanitarian and developmental programs, councils, and funds in its capacity as an active member in a number of councils and committees of international bodies, including the UN Security Council, the Economic and Social Council, the Human Rights Council, and others. Kuwait's priorities in the Security Council have always privileged peace and stability in the region and in the world, preventing conflict, enhancing dialogue among nations, and fighting all forms of terrorism. There are many bright linings in the path that connects Kuwait with the United Nations, the most prominent of which is the assumption of the first woman from Arab and Islamic countries to the position of permanent delegate to the United Nations, Kuwaiti Ambassador Nabil Al-Mullah, and her chairing of the board of International Atomic Energy Agency in 2002. Since its membership to the United Nations, the state of Kuwait has made significant contributions to the working of the organization and has been an active partner working closely on promoting the noble principles and purposes of the United Nations Charter, with the permanent mission of the state of Kuwait to the UN undertaking the responsibilities for carrying out the state's participation at the United Nations. Although considered a small country, the state of Kuwait has managed to attain multilateral depth, knowledge, and experience stemming from its membership in various regional and international organizations, which gave the state of Kuwait experience in mediating between parties as well as fostering partnerships in the midst of multifaceted challenges that have threatened regional and international peace and security. Furthermore, Kuwait is one of the top countries that have adopted the UN Charter in all its aspects of its work, especially towards the development and humanitarian diplomacy, and has endeavored to deal with all the recommendations made by the United Nations Human Rights Council, along with its affiliated organizations and councils.
I would like to start by congratulating us on this occasion. When I say us, I mean the State of Kuwait and the United Nations for this special partnership. Ever since day one of its membership in the United Nations as a member state, Kuwait started with full potentials, with full power to become an active and important member in the international family and in this forum, I mean the United Nations.
Kuwait has benefited from its pioneering role in cooperation with organizations and institutions at an international level, which can be described as fully compatible with the United Nations Charter and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Under this framework, Kuwait and the United Nations are committed to implementing Kuwait Vision 2035, working together towards sustainable development goals and jointly enhancing awareness and advocacy for Kuwait's international contributions to peace building, humanitarian support, and development cooperation. On the level of maintaining security, Kuwait has always had a strong presence in the Security Council, with its pioneering role in spreading the culture of peace and dialogue in addition to its clear assurance on the humanitarian level, represented by the Kuwait Fund for Arab Economic Development and its civil society. These institutions have worked towards maintaining respect for human rights and opportunities in creating a safe environment and a way of life, especially with the contributions and development support provided by the Kuwait Development Fund around the world. It is worth mentioning that Kuwait Fund has financed more than 990 projects that benefited 107 countries worldwide since 1961. And the value of loans extended to these nations amount to 6.5 billion Kuwaiti dinars, equaling 22 billion US dollars.
Kuwait Fund KFAD as an institution is and it was there ever since the independence of Kuwait. It is a symbolic and effective and practical tool for the state of Kuwait to reflect its deep beliefs of cooperation and developments.
Kuwait's official developmental assistance increased over time, including times of major crises and dwindling revenues due to the drop in the price of oil. Kuwait also hosted 3 consecutive conferences to raise funds in humanitarian support for Syria following its outbreak of war and chaos. The Kuwait Fund has further contributed $4 million to UNICEF's COVID-19 response in Syria in support of Syrian children and families. Kuwait's contribution provides the most disadvantaged and poverty-stricken children and families with continued access to essential health and nutrition, protection, education, water and hygiene services, in addition to life-saving information on prevention and protection from COVID-19. Since 2015, Kuwait has provided a total of $20 million in funding for UNICEF's support to children in Syria, as part of a wider response of the state of Kuwait to the Syrian crisis. This contribution by the Kuwait Fund will aid the overall UNICEF Syria COVID-19 multi-sectoral response plan, aiming to reach over 13 million people with awareness raising, including hygiene promotion, and over 6 million people with infection prevention measures such as the distribution of hygiene items and personal protective equipment, as well as installation of hand-washing facilities. Conclusively, the role of the charitable civil associations and foundations in the state of Kuwait are considered greatly complementary to what the state does at the official level. This desired role is highly regarded in light of its continued provision of assistance to all those in need anywhere in the world, without discrimination and regardless of religion, ethnicity, or nationality.
Kuwait as a society, even before the independence, even before the membership in the United Nations, was and will continue to be an active society. The cooperation, the humanitarian spirit of the Kuwaiti society, extending the hand to those who are in need, is deep-rooted in the culture of Kuwait.
In the procession of Kuwaiti diplomacy extending over to international relations, its principles have dictated that it has built a peaceful society and a modern state with humanitarian orientations. More than half a century of diplomatic work in harmony with the principles and goals of the United Nations began with a famous speech in which the state of Kuwait made its voice heard from the podium of the United Nations General Assembly. The late Emir Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Sabah may have summed up the political approach of the country in his speech at the UN on the occasion of the country joining the international organization on May 4th, 1963. As he said, Kuwait's participation in these international activities clearly indicates that it does not look on independence and membership of the United Nations as ends in themselves. It considers them rather as means of sharing in the responsibility of securing a better life for its people and for the people of other nations. The wisdom of the late Emir Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed in managing the Kuwaiti foreign policy since his work as foreign minister in the early 60s has had a great impact on Kuwait's distinguished role in the world of international politics and its international rise to the seat of the Security Council in the 70s. Along with the confidence of member states in the Kuwaiti role in the support of people's causes, in addition to the important role played by the Security Council in supporting the international military coalition to liberate Kuwait, issuing decisions that support Kuwaiti legitimacy. On September 9, 2014, the then Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, held a special function at the UN headquarters in New York to express the UN and the international community's appreciation for Kuwait and its late Emir's generosity and kindness by honoring and proclaiming the late Emir Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Jabr Al-Sabah as a humanitarian leader and of Kuwait as a center of humanitarian action. The well-deserved UN honoring came in recognition of the outstanding contributions of Kuwait under its wise leadership in humanitarian action worldwide, affirming the explicit fact that the state of Kuwait has become an international icon, promoting a humanitarian message of giving back to the world for the sake of relieving those stricken with man-made or natural catastrophes. In the same place of October 2020, the United Nations General Assembly held a special session to mourn the loss of the humanitarian leader Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Jabr Al-Sabah and to pay tribute. Global delegates stood for a minute of silence to mourn the loss of the virtuous ruler in memory of his legacy in humanitarianism, diplomacy, peacemaking, and conflict resolution. Following the tribute, the General Assembly President Volkan Bozkir praised the late Emir as a pioneer of preventive diplomacy due to his commitment to peace and conflict resolution through dialogue. For his part, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres described the late Emir as a distinguished statesman and human being, a builder of bridges and messenger of peace, stating that he was always prioritized cooperation and pluralism. After 16 years since joining the international organization, during the period 1978 to 1979, the state of Kuwait obtained for the first time in its diplomatic history the membership of the Security Council. In international circumstances that were fraught with bipolarity and an Arab atmosphere that followed the October 1973 war, while the Arab Gulf states were preparing to build their system of joint cooperation. Following months of its membership in the UN Security Council, Kuwait presided over the council in February of 1979 for the first time in its history. During the tenure, the permanent representative of the state of Kuwait, His Excellency Ambassador Abdullah Yaqub Shara.
They do not want to wrest from others the territories which they do not own. They look for a decent life after 3 decades of consignment in the abominable sordidness of refugee camps. The Security Council, Mr. President, can and should assist them in their endeavor for a better future and a better life. None of them forgets that the United Nations owes them so much after its illegal and graceless decision of partitioning their homeland without their consent or approval.
At the time, Ambassador Bshara played a pivotal role in representing the Arab point of view in the Security Council regarding the crisis in the Middle East and the Arab-Israeli conflict. After 40 years, the international community renewed its confidence in the state of Kuwait to assume a non-permanent seat in the Security Council for the period 2018 to 2019, with a focus on conflict prevention by investing in the capabilities of the United Nations in the field of preventive diplomacy, as well as dealing with crises that threaten peace and security in an orderly, prompt, and efficient manner via mediation efforts to resolve issues through peaceful means.
And the result of the voting is as follows. Number of votes obtained by each member state. Côte d'Ivoire, 189. Kuwait, 188. Equatorial Guinea, 185.
Since its membership to the United Nations, the state of Kuwait has made significant contributions to the work of the United Nations and has been an active partner working closely to promote the noble principles and purposes of the United Nations Charter. The permanent mission of the state of Kuwait to the United Nations has been responsible for carrying out the state of Kuwait's participation at the United Nations. The experience of Kuwait's non-permanent membership in the Security Council is clear in all its aspects, as it established during the exemplary period an unprecedented principle of good neighborliness and Arab statesmanship. The membership of the State of Kuwait in the Security Council, which actually began in January of 2018 and ended in December of 2019, constituted a new milestone in the path of affirming the stability of the values and principles that Kuwait believes in, which was inspired by 4 priorities, focusing on Arab issues, humanitarian issues, peaceful conflict resolution and mediation, strengthening the United Nations working methods.
It is indeed a milestone, a significant milestone in our diplomacy. And before we joined the Security Council, 1819, we prepared ourselves very well here in New York and in the capital, and we set out priorities to focus on during our membership. The first one was to defend the Arab issues, and in particular the Palestinian issue as a central Arab issues. The second issue is supporting the UN role in mediation and prevention. That means the UN has the tools. We want the UN to use it to solve the problems peacefully and to mediate among the parties involved in any conflicts, so either be it in the Middle East or in Africa or anywhere else. That was our second priority. The third priority is to enhance the working methods of the Security Council. In our capacity as chair of the informal working group responsible for that issue, we wanted to do something about it. The fourth issue, which is also important, they are all equal as priorities, is the humanitarian issues. To take the lead on the humanitarian issues. We have the credentials to do that, and we set it as one of our top priority during our membership.
Kuwait is a country with a vital and effective role on the developmental and humanitarian level and spreading peace and security. Despite its small geography, Kuwait is large with its clear record in several regions around the world, its pioneering role in devoting the culture of dialogue to spread peace and achieve security. The diplomatic line set by Kuwait in its policy of preventive diplomacy, dialogue diplomacy, spreading peace and rapprochement between peoples, and standing at the same distance from all parties, so that it can succeed in delivering and gaining respect for its word from different countries. The State of Kuwait formed a force and weight in the UN Security Council through its pioneering role and spreading the culture of peace and dialogue, by adopting the UN Charter as an approach to its policy and strategy, and presented its vision and diplomacy in a manner that was respected by all members of the Council. Kuwait had taken appropriate stances at each turning point of the Syrian crisis, and during its membership in the Security Council, Kuwait witnessed many diplomatic achievements, represented by the Council's adoption of Resolution 2449, presented by Kuwait and Sweden in December of 2018, which was an important step to ensure the continuation of humanitarian aid to Syria. As this resolution complements Kuwait's humanitarian efforts in Syria after Resolution 2401, which was adopted in February of 2018 during Kuwait's presidency of the Security Council.
On Syria, for example, we were able to convince the Council to adopt two resolutions on Syria, 2401 for a ceasefire on Syria, and this resolution has been adopted unanimously by all members of the Council for the first time. Even Russia joined us and supported that resolution. Unfortunately, it has not been implemented in the ground, but there was, at least international support for all our efforts. Sweden joined us, actually. We were together as a penholder. Penholder means we were authors of the resolution. And there's another draft resolution, 2449. It's this very resolution, a milestone resolution to alleviate the humanitarian suffering of the Syrian people. We renewed the international mechanism, cross-border mechanism, to allow the international community to support and to provide humanitarian assistance to the people in the north and on the east of Syria. We were able to get this done in the Council during our membership.
In November of 2018, Kuwait organized a meeting of protecting the environment during armed conflicts, where the burning of Kuwaiti oil wells in 1991 was highlighted as one of the biggest environmental disasters associated with armed conflicts. As we remember, Kuwait has proposed to the United Nations General Assembly in 2001 to declare the 6th of November of each year as the International Day for preventing the exploitation of the environment in war and armed conflict. Today's anniversary is one of the important milestones on the road to establishing and affirming Kuwait as a free country, and its policy is respected by the international community and international and regional organizations. This was clearly manifested in 1990, when the whole world stood by and supported Kuwait when it was occupied, and the Security Council adopted historic resolutions that reinforced the legitimacy, credibility, authority, and ability of the Security Council to maintain international peace and security while confronting serious violations of the United Nations Charter and international law. Furthermore, the concept of collective security was best exemplified in its optimal form during the operation to liberate Kuwait. Kuwait has identified 256 remains of 605 martyrs, and Kuwait recently received from Iraq the third batch of Kuwaiti property and archives that were seized during the Iraqi invasion in 1990.
Other aspects of the humanitarian issues, we managed to let the Council agree and approve a presidential statement regarding our POWs. That was significant because it's still it is a priority, and it is a national issue it has been adopted also unanimously during our membership.
Kuwaiti diplomacy recorded a great achievement that added to its long balance of achievements, especially in the humanitarian field. The Security Council's first ever standalone resolution on missing persons in armed conflict was unanimously approved, Resolution 247/2019, submitted by Kuwait, which calls for taking all appropriate measures to search for the missing and enable them to return their remains, which is precisely the first of its kind. Treat people who have been reported missing in the armed conflict. The draft resolution came as an initiative stemming from the suffering of Kuwait and the loss of its people during the Iraqi occupation in 1990, and in its belief in the need to confront the challenges resulting from armed conflicts and their negative repercussions on civilians. The Palestinian issue was on Kuwait's top priority in the Security Council after the Kuwaiti delegation presented to the Security Council in June of 2018 a draft resolution to secure international protection for the Palestinian people during a session called by Kuwait to discuss the dangerous developments in Gaza Strip at the time, but the Council was unable to adopt it due to the US veto.
Contributed to these important issues. For example, for Palestine, we stood fast in defending the Palestinian cause. And for the first time, Kuwait took the lead, and we introduced a draft resolution to protect the Palestinian, the civilians, to provide the humanitarian protection to provide the protection for the Palestinians in the occupied territories. That resolution, supported by 10 member states, but it was vetoed by the United States of America. But we continued, and we highlighted this issue during our membership, and we convened many meetings, we introduced many press statements, and we worked closely with the Palestinian mission here in the United States, and they really appreciated what we did. You know, non-permanent members cannot do, by himself, cannot do a lot of things, but we were able to put the Palestinians issue high on our agenda, in the Council's agenda.
In recognition of Kuwait's outstanding role, its diplomatic efforts, especially during its non-permanent membership in the Security Council, towards the fair Palestinian cause, the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas awarded Kuwait permanent representative to the UN headquarters in New York, Ambassador Mansour Al-Ataibi, the Star of Jerusalem Medal. Kuwait played a pivotal role in the Yemeni crisis, particularly during the negotiations that led to the Security Council issuing a presidential statement on the humanitarian situation in Yemen in March of 2018, in addition to Resolution 2451 in December of 2018 on the Stockholm Agreement. Kuwait also played a supportive role and provided logistical contributions to the Yemeni consultations held in Sweden, as well as contributions in the humanitarian field through United Nations agencies. Even after leaving the Security Council, the state of Kuwait continues to gather international support to alleviate the suffering of the brotherly Yemeni people and to work towards a political solution to the Yemeni crisis. The pivotal role of Kuwait also appeared in defending Arab issues in the Security Council, especially the situations in Iraq, Libya, Sudan, Somalia, and Lebanon, and Kuwaiti diplomatic activity extended beyond the Arab borders. Kuwait had an important role in highlighting the issue of the Rohingya minority, as Kuwait, along with the United Kingdom and Peru, led the members of the Security Council in the first field visit to Bangladesh and Myanmar to examine the situation of the Rohingya refugees.
We were able also to take the Council to field visits. We co-led this missions with other members of the Council. Like we were able to organize a visit to Bangladesh and Myanmar to highlight the plight of the Rohingya people. And we also managed to organize a visit to Iraq. We co-led this with the United States, and it was a very successful visit to support Iraq, to show them that the international community supporting them in their fight to terrorism, on their all their efforts to achieve peace and stability and reconciliation in Iraq.
The state of Kuwait, in its endeavors to improve the working methods of the Security Council and to add more transparency to its work, has been embodied from the position of the Presidency of Kuwait for one of the Council's subsidiary organs, which is the Informal Working Group on Documentation and Other Procedural Questions, in addition to the Presidency of the Security Council Committee pursuant to Resolution 1533 concerning the DRC, overseeing the sanction measures imposed by the Security Council.
We are the coordinator of the Arab group on this important issue to reform the Security Council. The Security Council is one of the most important organs of the United Nations. The United Nations has many organs, as you know, the General Assembly, the ECOSOC, ICJ, and the Security Council. The Secretariat also is one of the organs of the United Nations. The most important organ is the Security Council. Why it's important? Because it is mandated or entrusted by the UN Charter to maintain peace and security in the whole world. The discussions to reform the Council is ongoing for more than 2.5 decades, actually, and there is no results. As Arab countries, we have a position, a united position, and this position has been taken on a very higher level on the summit of the Arab League, on the ministerial level. There is specific demands that the Arab countries should be represented in the Security Council, and in particular on the category of the permanent members. So the Arab countries is asking for a permanent seat in the Council with all the authorities. That means even they want to enjoy the veto rights as the rest of the P5 member. We also want to have equal representation because, as you know, the Arab countries, we are 22 countries in the United Nations. We represent around 12% of the total membership. The other thing is that the Security Council itself is involved and discuss many Arab issues. And if you, percentage-wise, it has been calculated that the Arab issues represent more than 40% of what the Council discusses as a whole and all its deliberations. So there is a need for an Arab voice inside the Council. One non-permanent member is not enough, and we need more representation. We need more democratic Security Council, and we need to be there all the time as an Arab countries.
Kuwait's contributions to its pursuit towards the goal of international organizations are significant and important contributions in various aspects, including political and moral support, as the consistency and compatibility of Kuwait's policies at the regional and global levels with the principles and goals of the United Nations is of great importance. Kuwait continues to follow its approach, which places administrative, economic, and financial reforms as a top priority, while adopting an objective course that builds on the experiences of the past and sets the foundations for a brighter future. Kuwait further places focus on economic and financial sustainability, along with commitment to a nationwide public and private partnership, with cooperation towards the esteemed Assembly to ensure the adoption of necessary economic and reform legislations, in addition to taking all necessary measures to develop and support ease of business flow. Kuwait has been a model for active partnerships with the United Nations for over 57 years, working to maintain peace, humanitarian support, and overall development. In a new era where COVID-19 pandemic has greatly overwhelmed the globe and disrupted the systems of economy, trade, health, and social affairs, the United Nations and Kuwait, in partnership, have striven to build on innovations and ideas to highlight Kuwait's framework of response to the world. A new phase of challenges arose in 2020 when the average number of new COVID-19 cases per day began to jump from tens to hundreds to eventually passing the 1,000 mark. Many efforts have thus been made to effectively slow down the number of cases. The United Nations Country Team Rapid Response Plan is based on the evolving needs of the government, offering support to provide technical guidance to the health sector for early responses and raising awareness of prevention measures. The initiative also contributes to the analysis of the impact of COVID-19, along with its devastating effects on oil prices, national development, and partnerships with local NGOs.
As much as Kuwaiti society, Kuwaiti individuals are active and dynamic in responding to international humanitarian needs, they are active inside Kuwait as well. First of all, in campaigns towards helping those who are in need outside Kuwait and inside Kuwait.
In this regard, the world has been touched by the influential role of the state of Kuwait in its qualitative and influential response to the pandemic, straying away from geographical, religious, and ethnic determinants through its humanitarian role based on its belief and conviction of the importance of international partnership. Kuwait has thus generally donated the sum of $60 million to the World Health Organization to support response efforts to counter the COVID-19 crisis around the world. On behalf of the World Health Organization, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus expressed the continuous gratitude towards Kuwait through a post of Twitter saying, "Thanks to Kuwait's government and His Highness Sheikh Sabah Al Khalid Al Sabah for the strong support of the WHO's humanitarian work and COVID-19 response, including initiative to accelerate access to tools to combat COVID-19. Kuwait is one of our highest per capita contributors for emergency action and a strong partner in protecting people at risk."
Inside Kuwait, we have a very small number of refugees. Although they are small, but they are enjoying their full rights of residency, of work permits, and healthcare as well. So inside Kuwait, the Kuwaiti state covered its visitors, those who are expats living in Kuwait, with its vaccination plan. So as you know, refugees are amongst this category of people, the foreigners and expats. This is at the local level. Internationally, the state of Kuwait contributed through the WHO and through direct support to certain states who are in need for the programs in fighting the COVID-19 pandemic.
Kuwait is an important donor and a generous partner to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, providing a long-standing support to its operations within the Middle East. The UN Refugee Agency has been present in Kuwait since 1991. Through its contributions, Kuwait provides vital assistance for emergency programming, permitting the UNHCR to deliver essential services and meet the needs of refugees and internally displaced people.
UNHCR was founded in 1950 with headquarters in Geneva, present in 135 states with almost 200 offices all over the world. Kuwait started its offices UNHCR started its offices in Kuwait in 1991. Ever since, UNHCR and Kuwait are working together as partners, as example of good partnership between a humanitarian agency and a member state to provide help and support to millions, tens of millions of people all over the world. During the last decade, Kuwait was #1 state as a donor to UNHCR in this region.
Kuwait is therefore yet to adopt national legislation for refugees to sign the 1951 Refugee Convention. Kuwait thus supports international humanitarianism and has made several significant contributions to the UNHCR, amounting to around $400 million since 2013. It also provided a $1 million grant as an annual core contribution to the UNHCR. Kuwait therefore became a pioneer country in humanitarian philanthropy and international humanitarian initiatives, and a leader in hosting a multiplicity of related activities.
As you know, UNHCR is a multicultural community. Its staff come from different countries. We are proud here to have Kuwaiti nationals working with us. They are active colleagues in providing support to the organization in implementing its mandate inside Kuwait and beyond. Their knowledge and their expertise, their level of education, their level of dedication towards the humanitarian cause that UNHCR is serving.
The state of Kuwait has been keen on backing the Palestinian cause, the core issue of Arabs in international arenas, through demanding a halt of the Israeli aggression and recognizing legitimate rights of Palestinians. This was submitted on May 1963 in a statement read out by the late Emir before the UN General Assembly. Kuwait last March called upon the 46th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva to activate legal mechanisms to ensure holding the Israeli occupation accountable for its continuous violations of the human rights of the Palestinian people and to prevent them from impunity. The government of Kuwait has contributed over $5 million to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees in the Near East. This generous contribution to the agency funded its Syria operations and improved living conditions for over 500,000 Palestinian refugees in Syria, who continue to endure harsh conditions after many years of armed conflict. This support from the Kuwaiti government, as well as Kuwaiti-based organizations such as the International Islamic Charity Organization, the Kuwait Fund for Arab Economic Development, and the Kuwaiti Red Crescent Society, enables the UNRWA to continue to provide essential services to some 5.4 million Palestinian refugees across the Middle East. As of 2020, UNRWA has partnered with the Kuwait Red Crescent Society to protect food assistance and healthcare treatments for thousands of Palestinian refugees facing increased vulnerability due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Its contributions towards the agency's Zakat-certified emergency food assistance program in Gaza has subsequently reached thousands of Palestinian refugee households that depend on the UNRWA for quarterly food assistance. In addition, Kuwait's Red Crescent Society made a critical contribution to the agency's COVID-19 appeal to ensure the UNRWA's health department had the supplies necessary to continue providing life-saving care to the Palestinian refugees throughout the COVID-19 pandemic.
Kuwait did not only provide support to people in need. Kuwait played the example of, or led by example in its support to international organizations. First of all, by its humanitarian agenda. We spoke a while ago about Kuwait's humanitarian agenda. No discrimination based on race, religion, or political background. Kuwait was always there to provide support based on humanitarian needs, full stop. Kuwait participated in international forums and international conferences that are organized to provide support to humanitarian situations. And Kuwait also led the efforts of international community by inviting for or calling for conferences and meetings to provide either support or solutions or facilitate for solutions for conflicts, to end conflicts.
Kuwait had pledged $500,000 during a signing ceremony at the International Labour Organization headquarters in Geneva to support the ILO's decent work agenda in the occupied Palestinian territories. The permanent representative of the State of Kuwait to the United Nations Office and other international organizations in Geneva, Ambassador Jamal Ghnaim, presented the contribution to the ILO partnerships and relevant field support department directors. The State of Kuwait has contributed $500,000 to the International Labour Organization every year since 2006 for addressing decent work deficit areas in the occupied Palestinian territory. This additional support in 2020 brings the total contributions received to over $6 million. This new funding prioritizes implementing and developing the Palestinian social security system with the aim of extending social protection to all. Moreover, the state of Kuwait has extended aid to Palestine in its fight against the COVID-19 pandemic through the WHO and its specialized agencies as yet another step to its humanitarian initiative. The World Health Organization in turn delivered ventilators to Gaza hospitals amid a spike in COVID-19 infections that has tested the Palestinian territory's underdeveloped health system. The donations of the intensive care devices funded by Kuwait came following a call to alleviate overwhelming cases in hospitals within the territory. Important steps have been made through the strengthening of the basis of the 2035 vision for New Kuwait, with the UNESCO's institutions' reliability for managing culture and cooperation. Achievements are therefore being accomplished through lines of action, including supporting policies and legal frameworks, along with the development of human capital necessary to fulfill the objectives of the plan. The state of Kuwait has therefore made significant contributions to UNESCO towards ending crises and supporting education, youth, and aid programs. Kuwait's contributions coordinate with UNESCO on a larger scale in an effort to provide youth with learning opportunities along with improving the quality of education. Kuwait has been a model for active partnership with the United Nations for over 58 years, working to maintain peace, humanitarian support, and development. Our leadership and funding saved tens of thousands of lives and impelled others to participate in coordinated international action. This generosity extended beyond the Middle East as we continue to support humanitarian actions in all countries.
Call Kuwait as the example of a civilized nation that is positively affected and affecting its surrounding. There are thousands of expats working in Kuwait who come from countries with conflict or countries with economic troubles. Those people are working here in Kuwait with dignity, providing for their families in their home countries. This is another way in providing support from Kuwait as a state and Kuwait society to people who are in need globally.
The march of good deeds by the state of Kuwait throughout its history of copious giving and help for the needy around the world has been steadily proceeding, spearheaded by the faithful Kuwaitis and the wise leadership of His Highness the Emir, Sheikh Nawaf Al-Ahmad Al-Jaber Al-Sabah, and His Highness the Crown Prince, Sheikh Mish'al Al-Ahmad Al-Jaber Al-Sabah.